Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Walsh of DaytonVistas.com, and today I'm going to do a deep dive on a fascinating part of downtown Dayton, Courthouse Square. It houses one of the region's greatest architectural treasures. It's a prominent public space in the center of downtown, but in recent years, it's been called a shell of its former self and even a hindrance to other downtown development. The full story of how the square came to be, including how controversial and risky the project was at the time, has rarely been told. And some of the issues discussed then echo debates we're still having today about the identity of downtown Dayton. So, to get started, although today's Courthouse Square is radically different from what stood there before, the one thing that does remain is Dayton's old courthouse. This incredible structure was built in the late 1840s after a lengthy process spanning 3 years, as well as a court case over its ballooning costs. The design was patterned after a temple in Athens, Greece from the 5th century BC, and it was built with Dayton Formation limestone, quarried and transported by mule cart from just a couple miles south of downtown. When it was finally completed in 1850, it became one of the most celebrated structures in the region, and it's one of the best surviving examples of Greek Revival architecture in the entire United States. Its steps have been the site of many presidential speeches over the decades, from Abraham Lincoln to John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, and many more. The former neighbors of the old courthouse, however, no longer stand. To the west of it, on 3rd Street, was the old Montgomery County Jail building, built in 1874, which featured a striking mansard roof. A Dayton historian wrote in 1909 that the jail and courthouse were, quote, the first public buildings making the change from an irregular, half-conscious town to an awakened city of solid character and teeming life. And just a few years later, a significantly bigger new courthouse was built directly to the north on Main Street in 1884. The 3-story Second Empire style structure was connected to the old courthouse via a hallway. These buildings would serve the county until the 1960s, when today's court complex was built just down 3rd Street. Walking through Courthouse Square today, you can easily see the plaza spaces where this lost jail and courthouse once stood. But to get a true sense of the scope of the 1970s redevelopment project, you need to look up. Dayton's second tallest building, the then Mead, more recently Keybank Tower, was built as part of Courthouse Square, along with 2 other major structures. The square was actually a combination of a push for public park space and a later plan for a major business development. When government functions moved down the street, the old courthouse's future was uncertain, and there were bids from Dayton's business elite to buy the land for new development, including a $1.3 million offer from Arthur Bierman. But there was also a rumor that someone might try to save as open space the L-shaped tract around it and turn it into a park. That evolved into a proposal to save and restore the courthouse and then turn it into a museum surrounded by trees and fountains. The county leased the building to the local historical society in 1972. Then in 1973, the business side of the project emerged publicly when, quote, crusty old John W. Galbraith strode into City Hall to formally announce plans for the biggest single downtown development in the city's history. But according to newspaper reports from the time, developer Galbraith and the chairman of the Mead Corporation had already secretly gone to the city, which pledged its support. Then, quote, went through the motions of conducting public hearings on an irreversible decision. Aside from the old courthouse, the whole rest of the block would be demolished, which led to the displacement of dozens of businesses and bitter divides over the effects it would have on downtown. One source described the project as turning over an entire downtown city block to an out-of-town developer, and not just any downtown block, but the one block which businessmen and planners agree is the keystone to downtown. Business leaders reportedly exerted pressure on the rest of the business community to accept Courthouse Square. The city contended that downtown will explode with thousands of new jobs, but admitted that the figures are merely guesses. A Journal Herald poll found Dayton's citizens were almost evenly divided on the project. The director of the Dayton Development Council cited NCR cutbacks leading to a negative image of the city and argued that Mead's commitment was the most important factor. If we'd lost Mead to the suburbs or another city, he said, it would have been one of Dayton's own giving up on the city. That would be a major setback. The development would total some $60 million. $13 million was used to buy land, demolish buildings, and relocate businesses, including the popular King Cole restaurant. Over 30 merchants were displaced, and the Reverend Richard Ryder called the decision to freeze property taxes on the block for 20 years an $18 million giveaway benefiting big businesses. Nearby retailers also expressed concern, but their worry was that, quote, hippies would hang out on the plaza. There was also a curious antagonism to the 1884 new courthouse before it was demolished. One account referred to its gross proportion and inferior design, while in 1972 a county commissioner actually proposed demolishing it in front of the public during the downtown Christmas festival. The demolitions and development greatly affected the character of the center of downtown Dayton, as seen in this view. The new plaza was dedicated in 1974, while the Mead, DP&L, and Elder Bierman building in between were completed in 1976 to 77. These before and after images of the corner of 3rd and Ludlow Streets show the radical changes to Courthouse Square, as does a before and after of 2nd and Main Street on the other side of the block. The Mead Tower's first tenant, investment firm Green and Ladd, actually moved in before the old DP&L building next to it was razed, the tall structure in this photo, giving its employees a front row seat to its demolition, which was described as a spectator sport. At one point, a stockbroker looked out of his window and saw a crumbling wall coming towards him instead of falling the opposite way as it was supposed to. It crashed into the Mead Tower's lobby, breaking several windows and causing other damage. That site was turned into the plaza space here, as well as the now vacant basement level that once held 2 underground restaurants. Since it opened, Courthouse Square has had a rocky 50 years of existence, largely echoing the experience of downtown Dayton as a whole. Articles from the 80s are mixed in their review of the square, with one saying that it did not become the people magnet that others promised, but noting it has at least become a social center on rainless days and some weekend nights. This article shows one of the most popular events, its 15th anniversary celebration in 1989. A key factor for the square has been the decline in the number of downtown office workers and retail stores around it that bring in regular foot traffic. Courthouse Square was intended to connect to key areas nearby, like the Dayton Arcade, directly across 3rd Street, which was also redeveloped. But by the late 80s, over half of its retail spaces were vacant, and it shuttered completely in 1991. The downtown Reich's department store, by then renamed Lazarus, closed around then too. And the Elder Bierman on the square was the last downtown department store when it closed in 2002. Office vacancies had been an issue since Courthouse Square first opened. To qualify for financing for its tower, Mead had to lease over 125,000 square feet of space it wouldn't be using, at a time when a study found at least 300,000 square feet of vacant office space elsewhere downtown. Then in 2001, Mead shocked the region by announcing a merger and moving its headquarters to Connecticut. By 2006, they'd vacated the tower and cut their total regional workforce by 70%. The building became the Keybank Tower, but tenants continued to pull out in the ensuing years, eventually including the bank itself. These trends are major factors in the square's trajectory, although it still remained a popular spot for lunch among downtown workers up until 2020. But then the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and increased remote work for downtown office tenants have led to fewer workers around the square since. In 2023, a group of local organizations held visioning sessions for how to reinvigorate the space, and ideas included everything from a dog park to pop-up comedy shows. The Downtown Dayton Partnership also won a $75,000 grant to help with placemaking efforts on the square, and it continues to run lunchtime entertainment and monthly social events, which are now centered around a former shipping container turned event hub. Another factor in Courthouse Square's struggles had been a lack of maintenance, but the signature fountain, which had been shut off for years, was recently redone by the county. Business activity nearby has been mixed. The CVS store that was a mainstay on the square for 20 years recently closed, but the recent opening of new hotels nearby does have the potential to increase foot traffic around the square. One of them is directly across 3rd Street at the Arcade, where new retail spaces will also begin to open in a matter of weeks. And it was also just announced that the old courthouse itself is being reopened as a venue for more public and private events. So hopefully these developments can help tip the scales back towards Courthouse Square regaining its role as a vibrant community space for downtown Dayton. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment, subscribe to my channel, and check out my other Dayton history videos. You can also see my writing on DaytonVistas.com and join my Dayton history newsletter, where I send updates of all my work as well as info on live events. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.